Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play, where Michael and I are about to do our final thoughts on Hellboy the board game. And I'd show you the box lid, but I think there's stuff in it, and it's gone far away.
Oh, bye.
Bye. Bye. So, we've just been playing on the channel, as you've seen, and...
Would you like this? It's pretty much this on top of it.
Yeah, it's pretty much that.
But this is the rules.
Cool. Thanks, Michael.
You're welcome.
I've played much more Hellboy the board game, actually. I played a lot of Hellboy the board game. I'll tell you why. Because we played a few games, and they went wildly differently.
There was a lot of swing.
And then, swing is a bit different. Swing is sort of a swing and flavor within a single game.
Oh, I see.
What I mean is I've played some games
Swing
where
result.
the luck or random elements have just sort of combined to just destroy games. Very easy for Hellboy to spiral quickly out of control.
Definitely.
For those of you who are just joining us for this video, Hellboy is a miniatures game. It's a sort of not dungeon
crawler.
It's a sort of an area exploration game. It might be sewers, it might be a mansion, but if you're familiar with Dungeon Crawler, it looks a lot like that. You're moving around room tiles, exploring rooms, defeating monsters in the rooms.
Yeah.
The way the game functions is that there will be a initial investigation period, and based on the success of that initial investigation, you'll move into a confrontation phase with the final boss. And you'll always move into the confrontation phase, even if everybody is wiped out in the investigation step. The game is... The Kickstarter edition comes with 8 scenarios. The retail edition, I think, only comes with 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of which is the tutorial. But I'm not sure. So don't quote me.
That doesn't seem that many.
It's not many. But the third scenario... Because I don't... Yeah, the third scenario is the Conqueror Worm, which I think is one of the expansions.
Right.
But I don't know if that expansion is included in the retail version. So don't... I'm afraid I haven't figured that out. I'm sorry. I should have probably done that. But there's only actually one easy scenario in the Kickstarter edition. So there's only one easy scenario in the core box, which is...
The tutorial.
The tutorial, yeah. And you can... When you play the tutorial, you do a number of instructional rounds, and then you do your own free play towards the end, and also the confrontation is non-guided. But you can replay the scenario without any of the help of the book, so that it's more randomly generated. Mm-hmm. But what you can also do is, if you have the BRPD expansion, which again is a Kickstarter thing, I don't know if it comes in the retail version, but it's a way of randomly generating scenarios as well. And in the retail version, then you also get this medium difficulty, medium length scenario. And I think a short scenario, the scenarios are in short, medium, and long, and I think a short is really anywhere around 2 hours. I think it would be hard. The tutorial...
I think it would be hard to be pushed to get it lower than that.
Yeah, the tutorial can be done in probably about an hour because it's 3 rooms. But the short scenarios are typically 6, 7, or 8 rooms. Mm. So... realistically, you're looking at probably more like 2 hours because it's double the amount. And then a medium scenario, I think you're looking at around 3+ hours. And for a long one, I haven't actually attempted a long one, but it's probably, you're looking at 4+ hours.
That's if you get that far.
That's if you get that far. Well, the thing is, like I said, it always ends with the confrontation, and this is sort of... I mean, the way the game works is that there's you have stats that are not numerical but based on colors. And so what you do is whenever you have to test, you grab a bunch of colored dice. I have them. And the dice escalate in terms of their quality, with yellow being the worst, then orange and red, and black being the best. You'll also always roll this blue effect die, which can have a very good effect or a very bad effect. And you're never really sure what's going to come up. And... these checks, you're using them for attacking enemies, you're using them for defending. I think the core set only comes with the frog enemies, but then if you've got some of the Kickstarter stuff or the expansions, you might also have Nazis and witches and animals and a ton of different kinds of bosses as well.
Wow. Okay.
And if you're setting up one of the random scenarios, you can actually put on what's called abnormal threat, where you'll be fighting frogs and Nazis and animals.
Oh, wow. So it's a mixture of everything.
Yeah, and you're really not sure, because you only ever really use 4 enemy types per board. And that's just the way the game is set up. That's how it functions. So I think it sort of randomly fills those slots. It's like just shuffle the enemies and deal them out or something. I'm not sure.
So you could have 2 frogs, a witch, and a
Nazi machine gunner, But there's lots of different kinds of Nazis. There's machine gun Nazi, rifle Nazi, knife Nazi, and you don't know which one you're going to get.
So you could get 4 really hard things.
Easy ones and 4 really hard ones.
Yeah.
Well, there's one Nazi, the Nazi officer, who always spawns with a rifleman. So then you would kind of have 2 for 1, I've played the game probably about 6 times now, maybe 7, and I've done a couple of short ones, a couple of medium ones, and no long ones. And then I've only done easy difficulty twice. The rest have all been on medium. I've only won the easy scenarios and never won the medium scenarios.
Yeah, it seems ridiculously... Well, our playthrough, which was on easy...
Right, the one we've done with the learn and sort of play where we were Liz and Hellboy.
Yes.
Incidentally, caveat, we're going to talk basically nothing about the IP because we don't really know anything about it.
No.
From what I understand is the sculpts of the models very effectively capture the art and sort of style of the comics, and the tiles and the tiles and stuff on the tiles don't. That's what I've been told. But I honestly don't know comic books, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. So we're basically just talking about it as a board game.
Yeah. Would you want to buy if you weren't a fan of the Hellboy comics, maybe? That's something to...
If it was a really good game.
Yeah.
I mean, there are examples.
But how would you know?
Well, that's why we're making these videos.
Exactly. Well done, us.
Well done, us. Well, because like the Battlestar Galactica game, however you feel about Battlestar Galactica or hidden role games, is hugely popular.
Yes.
And that's not because it's Battlestar, that's because it's a good game. Well, however you feel about the Battlestar Galactica game, this is not about that. No. The point is that that's a good game. It's beloved to people, just not just for being Battlestar.
Yeah.
And the and More Pork Discworld game by Martin Wallace, another one that's beloved, not necessarily because of Discworld.
Got you. But yeah,
StarCraft. Anyway,
I have 2 experiences of this game, and even though our game through gameplay was on easy, I don't think that could have escalated. Even though it was on easy, that could have gone so much worse.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and I think it's because there seems to be a lot of the dice roll where I like this element of being able to increase and decrease difficulty depending on monsters and depending on weapons and skills that you have. There just seems too much randomness with it, and I think you could get easily frustrated with a game where you constantly roll bad die. Not that I would do that.
So the dice pool can seem very swingy, which means that the variance between the best possible result and worst possible result is a big difference. You could wind up one-shotting a very difficult monster. You can also wind up actually hurting yourself and having no effect at all. Which is
on a really easy monster.
On a really easy monster, or another. Well, you can't hurt yourself on a really easy monster, I don't think. Only on the armed frog monster. Right. So again, and who is the hardest frog monster. So it depends on your enemies, but you might wind up running out of ammo and sort of setting yourself back. And I've got sort of mixed feelings about the action cube system, which is what this uses. You get 3 action cubes, but you might have fewer depending on how things have worked out for you. But I'll talk about that in a minute. What I wanted to say up front was just a few things I liked about it.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm going to have a lot more negative stuff to say after that, I'm afraid. I like the scope of the short game. And the medium game scope is okay too, by which I mean that when you're laying out the board and you're putting out the encounter cards, and I like the sense of exploring these maps and discovering new things and sort of uncovering stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's sort of, I like that there's an amount of, it's very light on story. And I think it is relating a lot back to the cases from the comics. My understanding is that this has these the board game has these case file decks that you go through and things happen. Mm. My understanding is that the comics are laid out by sort of case narratives as well. So you'll have sort of like an arc where Hellboy deals with a sort of a whole case. And then, like the frog people or the Ogredin, or he might have the one where he does the Nazis or whatever. So I think they're trying to replicate that with these case decks.
Right.
However, obviously, you're not going to get a whole comic book story arc into one of these decks, are you?
No.
So I think I like the way that they've sort of done that. I think it's very light on story, but because I don't know the Hellboy stories,
I was just going to say that
because I don't know them, I'm kind of okay with it because it sort of gives you this. Although, to be fair, in our first game that we played with the snake woman, why was she eating cattle?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
But maybe that's just because you created a random draw.
Well, that's exactly right. So it randomly generated the case file. So it would have made a lot more sense for her to be like a big wolf monster or something, rather than a Iron Maiden snake lady who ate cattle. But I guess, you could kind of justify it. But
maybe she likes beef.
And she's got witch and animal friends.
Yeah.
But then again, she could have been a Nazi boss,
Yeah. Or a gorilla with a gun.
I don't think she could have been the gorilla because I don't think he counts as a boss.
Shame.
But yeah, shame. But I like the exploration. I like the investigation phase. I like how you're sort of preparing for this confrontation, and it's going to come to a cool climax because there's a big boss fight at the end, and so you're just trying to get there on an even footing. I like all of that.
Yeah, I think I like that too.
So I like the sort of the pacing, the flow of the game,
yes,
and stuff like that.
Because it reminds me a lot of other games like that as well, which I enjoy.
I also quite like, in theory, the action point system where you spend actions to either perform an action or you spend more actions to bolster an action. So when you spend an action cube, you take a number of colored dice associated with your statistic, plus the blue die, you always roll that, and you throw them. If you want to spend extra action cubes, you can to upgrade the die. So you'll have fewer actions this round, but the ones you do take will be more effective. Which I like in theory. The problem is you only have 3 action cubes, and you basically never get more. So you'll only have 3 actions, and you can lose them from being stunned, you can lose them for a number of reasons. You can very rarely get 1 action cube back. But that's usually only after you've completed a test. And I feel like if they'd given you more action cubes...
Or the ability to gain them.
Or the ability to somehow gain them, or something like that, then I would have felt...
Or maybe some characters start with more, and some characters start with less.
Yeah, that would be really cool, actually, to have some characters that sort of were really good at had a really good stat line, but fewer actions available to them.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, so because all the characters have the same kind of stat distribution with a few small differences. No, that doesn't mean they're similar. I just mean they're sort of all on a similar level.
Yeah.
But they're balanced differently. Some are good at shooting, some are good at investigating, some are good at fighting or defending. And then some of them are not so good at any of those things, but have really cool special abilities that kind of make up for it.
Yeah.
But they all have the same 3 action cubes. And I guess that, like I said, I guess that's fine. It just doesn't feel like I've got a lot of decision space, Typically, I either do like one really good check if I'm in a fight, or...
Particularly if you've got to use those cubes for admin.
Well, like sort of running around and clearing up stuff off the board.
Yeah.
So the board will become populated by things that benefit your enemies, and you just kind of run around clearing it up. And that kind of, it just feels like a chore. It never really feels like something fun or interesting or exciting to do.
No.
And there's quite a lot of things that come out on the board that you really have to take care of. And it doesn't feel like it adds a whole lot. No. It just kind of adds running around.
It could add frustration more than anything.
Well, I think there are a good number of things to get frustrated about in this game. Because, so talking about the game flow, there are 3 ways to trigger the confrontation, one of which is everybody's knocked out at the same time. And then you go into the boss mode. But before I talk about why that's a problem, I'm going to talk about the setup time. The game,
oh my god.
It takes a long time to set up this game because you've got to build a whole... And
it's the deck building. The
good news is most of it's up front. So once you've done all the setup, you're kind of just ready to go with a few exceptions. But I'll get to that in a minute. But even you're just building all these decks and putting these decks together, and it's all very particular. And this sort of shuffling decks of cards and dealing out some cards and then shuffling those cards together, it takes quite a long time to set up.
It feels like you've nearly played half the game before you've even got going. And
that wouldn't be such a big issue, except there are a number of things that can swing this game one way or the other. And they are primarily to do with the difficulty. You see, you can level up you can control the difficulty of the case if you're randomly generating it. If you're not, then it just has a set difficulty, and that's what it is. Mm-hmm. I have found that the difficulty of the randomly generated cases is slightly harder than the difficulty of the set constructed cases. But because it's your game and you have all of these decks of cards and components to build the game out of, you have some hand in controlling the difficulty.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can modify the difficulty not only by the actual enemies that appear in the game and the kinds of encounter cards you use, which you will be instructed to use by the game. So unless you actually know the difficulty of the different colored symbols on these cards, here are the encounter cards that are in the game, and these are put out in rooms and flipped over when you enter a room to tell you what's in it. They all have these little color coding in the bottom left-hand corner, and the game will tell you how to construct a deck out of these, and then you'll be sort of randomly dealing them out to rooms during deck setup. You'll make like little decks and deal some of those out, and that's all kind of board admin you have to do when you're setting up. But furthermore, these little codes in the bottom corner, these little colored symbols, kind of represent the difficulty of what's on the actual card itself. Mm-hmm. If you learn all of these cards and what those difficulties are, you could actually curate the encounter deck to create an easier or more difficult experience. But that's a lot of effort, and the thing is, you don't really know until you've actually been through that deck and read all the cards and know all those difficulties, whether or not you want to try and adjust the difficulty of the encounters based on your knowledge instead of what the game's telling you to do.
And then if you're doing randomization of monsters...
And then if you're randomizing the monsters, but I'm not even talking about the abnormal threats where you've got the Nazis alongside the frogmen or alongside the werewolves. What I'm talking about is if you get a set of enemies, if you pick one set of enemies like frogs or Nazis or beasts, then you will get the same four minions in every game. Yes. So if you pick Nazis, you'll have the same four Nazis, enemy types in every game.
And then you can work that out.
Well, yeah, except that the Nazis are much, much harder than the frog people, who are much, much harder than the beasts. So you can still kind of modify the difficulty based on what minions you took. But if you're randomly generating the case study, then you won't know what they are until you reveal it. But then you could just set it so that you would know. And the thing is, the game doesn't tell you that Nazis are the hardest. That's just based on my experience. You might find something completely different, but you'd be wrong. They are the hardest by far.
They're bad. They bad.
Oh, they're really hard. So you can control the difficulty somewhat with the encounter deck, but it doesn't really give you any guidance on that. You can control the difficulty somewhat by the minion card you pick, but you don't really get any guidance on that. You can control the difficulty by this Doom deck that you have to build, which has Doom cards of easy mode and advanced mode and regular one of those kinds of modes, plus all these other cards that you shuffle in. And then you've got these advanced difficulty cards as well, which you can add if you want. If you're playing a randomly constructed deck, it tells you not which card to add, but it tells you to add a card. However, there are different kinds of cards in here as well, and some of them are like Unexpected Threat Werewolf, which isn't so bad. And some of them are like Unexpected Threat Baba Yaga, which is really bad. And so these all kind of spawn a mini boss. One of them is the Evil Turkey, which is kind of bad. The thing about the Evil Turkey is he's not really bad unless you get really bad rolls, and then he's awful. So what I'm saying, though, basically, is there's a lot of ways to adjust the difficulty of this game, and you're given no guidance on it. And what that winds up resulting in is a lot of swings. You never really know if the game you're entering in is going to be really easy or really hard. Because if you put one of these cards in, you might never see it. You're probably only going to go through half the deck that card is in any given game, which means that you might never see this card, or you might have it come out immediately. And you never really know when it's going to come out either. And we've actually broken the game with those cards as well.
Yeah.
But my point is that the game gives you no guidance at all on adjusting the difficulty, and that makes it very, very difficult to curate the experience you're going to have with your friends unless you know it super well. Yeah. So if you're ready to get stuck into the Hellboy universe and play the game over and over again, then this might not be that big a deal for you. But if you're the kind of person with limited time, or you don't want to play Hellboy on your own a whole ton before you play with your friends, then you can never really be sure what kind of experience you're going to have going in, and that makes it a big lottery. Add to that the swinginess of the dice effects and the setup time to play the game. It means that you're not really sure if all the effort you're putting in is going to really...
give you the experience you want.
Yeah, give you the experience you want. Furthermore, when you get to the confrontation phase, which I was talking about earlier, you're not really sure... That confrontation phase, how you go into it, will entirely determine how successful you might be at it. And the problem there again is that it's like another 10 to 20 minutes of admin setting up the confrontation phase. Because you're flipping over more case cards, you're working out which ones are still in play, which ones have triggered, what do you need to do. Entering into that confrontation phase can be triggered sort of in 3 different ways primarily, right? You get the sort of optimal entrance, where you kind of figure out what's going on the map in the investigation phase, and then you just kind of begin it at your leisure. Or you get the, like Michael and I did in the playthrough you will have seen on the channel. Or you're going to get the one where the Doom tracker has advanced too far, and then the boss is going to spawn, and that makes it more difficult, but you might have a chance, especially if you're doing okay in the investigation phase, but you're probably still screwed. And then you're going to have the one where you all got knocked out, and then it just triggers immediately, and there's no point in setting that up. You're going to spend 20 minutes setting up to lose immediately.
To be like, what's the point?
Well, everybody's knocked out, so then they're all going to come back on the board with 1 health. And you're going to reveal all of the... spoilers. Spoilers. You will probably also have to reveal all the encounter cards on the board. So you're going to come onto a board with like 10 enemy minions, or 5 enemy minions, or even just 2 enemy minions, and a boss, and you've all got 1 hit point.
Which is
impossible. You're never
How on earth are you going to do that?
That would be such a long shot. And I'm just not sure if it's worth taking the time to set it up just to find out whether it's going to pay off. I don't think it is.
It's not. I firmly believe it's not.
There is sometimes a little bonus you can get going into the confrontation phase. And that bonus can be triggered with any of these 3 endings. Sort of with any of these 3 trigger types. So you might have the go in the worst possible situation with this little bonus, but it's probably not going to be enough to save you. It depends on what case you're playing and how the cards have come out. And so, in order to mitigate all of this difficulty, you either have to sort of know the cards really well and set the game up in a way that you think will be not too easy and not too hard, unless you want to go at it too hard. But I found that the game scales up to too hard really, really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And then you also have to really, really pick your characters carefully and maybe get a little lucky. If it's a randomly generated scenario, you won't be able to pick your characters carefully because it's random and you don't know what's coming. But if it's a case that you've played before, then you can play it again. Some stuff will change, but most of it will stay the same. So you can kind of predict what's coming and make intelligent choices based off that.
Yeah.
But, then you're sort of bound into what characters you use on each one. And then you also get these requisition cards, which are equipment you give to the characers in order to go into the mission. And choosing that really carefully is also really important. And that's a deck of like 50 cards, And you have to remember when to use it and pick those moments really, really carefully too. So... it's very, very easy to make the game much too easy, and it's very, very easy to make the game much too difficult.
Hard, yeah.
And I think you have to be really lucky to hit the sweet spot, and if you do, the game's actually pretty cool.
It's a lot of effort to get there, though.
But it's a lot of effort to get there.
A lot of effort and 2 a lot of luck.
A lot of effort and a lot of luck, yeah. You could still get unlucky. I don't know why anyone would play with these cards. They just make the game really miserable.
They can do. I mean...
I've never played a game with one of those cards that was fun.
No.
Because they just spawn a boss before the confrontations phase. And because you could, it's your game, you could add these to any deck of Doom that you're playing with. You don't have to use them in the random decks. But if you use one of these, you are instructed to put them in the randomly generated cases. And then you might have one that's the same as the end game boss. So you either defeat a boss and then it immediately comes back harder, or... you haven't yet defeated it, and then you trigger the confrontation while that boss is still on the board, and then you've broken the game because it doesn't tell you how to get around that. I know, I read all the facts. Now, it does tell you what to do if 2 bosses spawn, because there's not enough cards to build 2 boss decks. You just kind of shuffle all the cards together and then kind of distribute... Anyway.
Yeah.
And then when you reveal moves for a boss, you pick a card that's associated with that boss, which is fine. I actually have no problem with the way they've sort of handled that. But if there are 2 bosses on the board, you're probably going to lose.
Yeah.
It's really, really difficult to win. But it depends what your objective is as well, because I've played it both ways, where the objective has just been kill the boss, and that's been really doable. And it's also been kill the boss, and that's not been doable. It's also said, here's an objective that's not kill the boss. You've just got to survive the boss's attacks long enough to complete this other objective. But that objective has been based on sort of the random layout of the board at the time. And oftentimes it's based on the position of the lead investigator or something like that. So if you knew how that card was going to play out, you could rig it so that when the card triggered, it was actually really easy for you. But I don't like a game where I have to metagame like that, where I have to go in with foreknowledge of the cards that are going to come out, and then just cheese the game so that the objective spawns right next to the exit, or whatever. Like, that feels cheesy to me. And so, it's really hard to recommend this game.
You might really like it if you like the theme.
If you're into Hellboy, and you really get Hellboy, I think you might really like it. The abilities of the characters feel very thematic.
Yes. I feel like if you knew Hellboy a lot more than what we do, then I think you would get a lot more enjoyment out of it as well.
Yeah, and if you were very if you were very happy to just kind of romp, if you thought you were going to be playing it a lot and you were sort of prepared to learn all of this stuff and curate the game effectively, then it might be like fun. Because it doesn't feel when you're playing it like it feels like there are sort of good and bad choices. But then because the dice are so swingy, I don't feel like I'm fairly rewarded for my good decisions and adequately punished for my bad ones. Sometimes I feel like I just got lucky, which is fine. Obviously a dice game is going to have luck in it.
Of luck in it, exactly.
But I want to feel like that luck is more closely tied to the good and bad decisions that I've made. And in this game, it doesn't feel like if you watch the game I played with Michael, he kind of just sucked throughout. And that was just bad dice consistently, So it's like, what are you being rewarded for the decisions you're making?
No. But we also played with Ollie, didn't we? And at the start, I was bossing it.
Yep. Yep.
So it's bizarre, and yeah, it's. You're right. You could make all the bad decisions from a game point of view, but be rewarded through luck.
But you'd have to get there are tactics and things. Most of it comes from choosing when to use items, though.
Yeah, but what I mean is you could make all the bad decisions. They're like, oh, that was such poor gameplay, but not be punished for it because you're rolling lucky. Or make all the best decisions in the world because you could be like, oh, we need to do this. Yes, we did this at the right time. We activated this object at the right time. And then if you roll garbage, don't matter, you're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, I imagine, can be so frustrating.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, like I said, if they'd given you more action cubes and you could have chosen when to upgrade your dice rolls sort of more effectively, because you can blow through all of your actions just defending against enemy attacks. And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. Like, you can just
boring.
Play... But it's boring. Because then you won't get to do anything in the player phase. You'll just spend your whole turn defending in the enemy phase in order to enable your friends to actually play the game.
Yeah,
and without being murdered. And I like how vulnerable the characters feel, but I just don't feel like we've got sort of enough. Everything that takes cubes away
feels very punishing. You can't get the...
and it feels like... But it also feels like it's basically sort of a very elaborate miss a go. And that's not fun. Missing a go is never fun. If I didn't spend action cubes on defense roll because I wanted to save them to take actions in the player phase, that's cool. I like that. If I take a lot of damage because I didn't defend, I'm fine with that. I made that choice.
Yeah.
But you don't have enough action cubes to feel like you're really making a choice. Because if you're just spending them on defense, you're going to die. Because you're not doing any damage. You're not killing anything.
Well, and you could also spend them on defense, and it'd be useless.
That's true. Yeah.
So then you've double...
Yeah, and then you've just got to rely... And, it is a team game. You're going to have friends with you. Maybe you control 4 characters by yourself. We've played 2-character games as well, and we've won and lost. But, I don't feel like... I've almost never taken the cubes for use in defense rolls. It's almost never felt worthwhile.
Never. It doesn't feel like you're utilising your go to the most optimum that you can.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Optimal moves are often quite apparent. In this game, which is a bit of a shame, really. And in other news, I like all the models, except that there are,
and that's probably where the high cost comes from.
But the problem is that they made a bunch of the terrain on the board models too, or tokens and things on the board, and it's too much.
Too much grey.
Too much grey plastic. Yeah, they should have made the good guy characters a different colour to the bad guy characters. And they should have made the clue tokens just tokens. It was a stretch goal in the campaign, but the clue tokens they've given you are...
They don't really add anything, do they?
Well, they're too varied. You know, there's too many of them and they're all too different. And then you don't really know what they're... I mean, you can remember what they're meant to be, but it just doesn't really look appropriate on the board. And it just kind of blends in.
They're not really wow, are they?
Well, the problem is you've got these grey plastic things that are heroes. You've got the same grey plastic things that are enemies. You've got the same grey plastic things that are like debuff tokens for the enemies, like the sinister birds and frogs. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the same grey tokens, which are clue tokens for the players to interact with to uncover information.
It's like, so what's... I remember thinking in one of our playthroughs that I'm like... I thought an enemy was with me and it wasn't. It was a character.
Yeah, it's all a sort of grey amorphous blob in the end. But the it's a shame because the sculpts are really nice. And I think if you're going to paint them, then that would be cool.
That would be cool.
Here's some stuff. But if you were going to paint them, that would...
See, I think that would be cool if all the frogs were like painted.
Yeah. But there's a lot of miniatures in this box, and you have to really love this game to go through all the work to paint them all.
Oh my word!
You know, and I just don't know if it's worth it. You know, if I could only pick one game, like a year, but I had a lot of time to invest into it, I might be interested in this because I could become that curator that I'm talking about. I could become the expert. But as an adult with lots of games to play and more games than time, I'm afraid. Yeah. I just don't know. I just don't think it's worth the investment. If they'd given me a chart that said, here's how to make this game easy and difficult. Here's what these cards will do if you add them. Like, these will make it a lot harder, but also randomly. Mm-hmm. They will potentially add a lot more difficulty, but based on the number you add in, you may never see them. And if it gave me a chart like that, a guide to all of these things, so I could... a shorthand to curate the game.
Yeah, it definitely needs a shorthand.
Yeah, so if someone creates that online, that would be great. But in the meantime, I just feel like I'm doing the work balancing the game, because they haven't.
So the one thing, bar learning how to upgrade and downgrade die, or dice, actually, the general playthroughs of the rounds, I think is quite simple. Once you've learnt it, it's quite simplistic.
Yeah, it's not a super complicated game, but there's
a
lot of
I know there's lots of nuances, but the general basics of it actually isn't that taxing, I don't think. I think that's one of its key strengths. It's not too complicated. Yeah,
but there's no good player aids. I had to make my own, and I missed some stuff off it, and then sure enough, I forgot those things.
There were times where we were like, oh, we should have done this, and we should have
downgraded a die here, we should have upgraded a die there. And it's so easy to forget all of that. And that was another complaint I had, but I don't really care to go into it now. I feel like I've said enough. But just the building a die pool, it's fine if there's like 3, 4, 5 enemies on the board. That's okay. But when you get more than that, and you're having to resolve die pools for all these different enemies being influenced by all these different factors, it gets difficult. You just feel so demoralized because it almost feels at that point unwinnable anyway. It just can feel like, why am I bothering? Let's just reset it and try again, or put it away.
Yeah. The thing that's, I think, is quite, which we don't know for sure, but from what you've said, I think it's a lot of money for not a lot of scenarios.
Well, there is the randomly generated ones, and there's an expansion that I don't have that you can buy for £75.
See, that's almost like nearly double the game.
Yep. Double the price of the game.
And I think if you were to say to me, here's £175, go buy a game, I don't think I'd buy this. I think there's so many more games I would prefer. I'm probably a bit similar that I would prefer to buy first.
Well, for £175, you could get the core set for Too Many Bones, which is a great fantasy adventure game that uses a lot of dice.
It's Mansions of Madness?
Mansions of Madness, yep. There's people really like Shadows of Brimstone, but I haven't played it. I've heard that's quite similar, but I've also heard that's very imbalanced. So, I mean, if you want... But, I mean, to an extent, these kinds of games are never sort of fully balanced. But my issue here is not really with it being balanced. It's that there's no real indicator given how difficult things are.
Yeah.
And so I would be hesitant to sort of, spend 4 hours on this one. I don't really know what's going to happen.
Yeah. You just don't know what you're going to get out.
I don't like, that's the thing about Mansions, is that it gives you a difficulty rating for each scenario up front. The app controls a lot of that to make sure it's kind of fair at that difficulty rating, and it tells you roughly how long these things will take as well.
And it's usually not that inaccurate, is it? It's fairly spot on.
It's usually pretty spot on, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've found... The other thing about mansions I've found is that I can generally beat the easy ones first try. To be fair, I've beaten the easy ones on this first try as well. But I'm not sure how the one we played would have gone if Baba Yaga had come out.
Yeah, probably
would have been so much worse. It had so much more time, and then you almost always run out of impending Doom track.
Yeah, because
and then that triggers a terrible boss confrontation. So I'm afraid it's not a massive recommendation from us on Hellboy.
Which is sad.
But you know, I do hope that you'll check out our gameplay videos for yourself and see if it's something you're interested in.
It's getting a lot of positivity, isn't it? And people.
Well, yeah, but I think that if you're willing to put the work in, if you're willing to curate it, you can create a fun experience out of this. But there are other games that will make it easier and more accessible for you to do it. You know, so you actually have to like really love Hellboy in this universe, and I'm not even sure if that's enough because the cases themselves, it's more like the best. It's more like special guest appearances from the characters you know. It's not going to tell the stories that you're familiar with. Yeah. You know, like the Apocalypse Doom Hand or whatever. You're not going to get any of that story out of this. You know, it's like there's some things, cows have been eaten. Oh, it was the Snake Woman from Comic 84, you know?
Yeah, and that means absolutely nothing to us.
It's just a get, but what I mean is, you know, you're going to encounter those people you know, but you're not going to get a story
out of it.
That's rewarding now. But you know, you can make up the teams of the characters that you know as well. There's another way to control difficulty. In addition to all the main characters being different in terms of difficulty, also in terms of actual nuance, what they demand from the player, there comes with a whole bunch of regular human BPRD agents, BRPD agents, who are like less good than these ones. So you can be like Kate Corrigan, but she's not as good as any of the supernatural agents.
Yeah.
So then it's like, wow, you can just make that harder for yourself. But I just feel like the game is like way too top heavy on the hard side. And I don't think that you can become so good at this game that you could make it that difficult and ace it reliably.
No.
You know? It's too swingy. The dice are too swingy.
Too swingy, dude. Too swingy.
You'd have to be really, really good at it and then play it a whole bunch of times.
Don't know if I can be bothered putting that effort in.
Not when there's so many other really great games to play.
Yeah. Oh.
Sorry,
Hellboy.
Sorry, Hellboy. Maybe next time. Hey, and if you enjoy this stuff that we do, subscribe to the channel. Yeah. And watch our videos and give us thumbs up.
But yeah, never mind. You'll be doing another adventure tomorrow, won't you?
Maybe.
Probably.
We'll be back for something completely different tomorrow.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
See you soon, guys.